Mia Bennett thought she finally found peace living alone, until the night she heard slow, deliberate footsteps echoing through her apartment and realized they were coming from inside. Mia Bennett had always dreamed of living alone. After years of noisy roommates and crowded city apartments, she finally found a place that felt like hers. It was a small one-bedroom apartment in an old brick building on the edge of downtown Portland. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and wood polish, the kind of scent that clung to places that had stories of their own. The rent was surprisingly low for the area, but Mia didn't question it. She was just happy to have her own space, a quiet corner of the world where she could breathe. Her days were routine. She worked from home as a graphic designer, spending long hours in front of her laptop while the faint hum of traffic filled the silence. The apartment was old but charming, with tall windows that let in soft light and creaky wooden floors that whispered when she walked. At night, she would make tea, curl up on the couch, and scroll through her favorite shows until sleep pulled her away. Life felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. But peace has a way of masking what's waiting beneath it. One Thursday night, rain began to fall in steady sheets outside her window. Mia sat in bed, reading on her tablet, listening to the rhythm of the storm. Around midnight, she turned off the lights and lay back, ready to sleep. The room was completely still. A moment later, she heard its soft footsteps, slow, measured, and deliberate. They came from somewhere near the living room. For a moment, she thought it was her imagination, the sound of the building settling. But then came another step, and another. Her heart began to pound. She stared into the darkness, her breathing shallow. The footsteps seemed to stop, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed against her ears. She waited, frozen, trying to convince herself it was from a neighboring unit. Maybe someone walking upstairs, but there was no one upstairs. Her apartment was on the top floor. Mia forced herself to get up. She reached for her phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam of light trembled in her hand as she moved through the apartment. Everything looked exactly as she had left it. The kitchen counter was empty. The bathroom door was open. The front door was locked. There was no one there. Yet, as she turned back toward her bedroom, she could have sworn she heard it again. Just one faint step behind her. The next morning, Mia tried to convince herself she had imagined everything. It was late. She was tired, and the sound of rain could have played tricks on her mind. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had been inside her apartment that night. Still, she pushed the thought aside and went about her day as usual, working on her design projects and trying to ignore the uneasy silence that now filled her home. A few nights later, she heard the noise again. This time it was softer, more distant, but real. It came from the hallway just outside her bedroom. She sat up, holding her breath, and listened. A quiet creak, followed by another. The sound of slow, deliberate movement, like someone trying not to be heard. When she turned on the lamp, the noise stopped instantly. Once again, when she checked, no one was there. The front door was still locked, and the windows were shut. Nothing seemed disturbed. Soon, other strange things began to happen. Her toothbrush was in a different position than she remembered. The remote control appeared on the kitchen counter instead of the couch. Her favorite mug, the one she used every morning, was sitting clean and dry on the table, though she was certain she hadn't washed it. Small, meaningless details, but together they created a quiet panic that began to grow stronger every day. Mia started leaving small marks around her apartment, a piece of tape on the closet door, a hair on the drawer handle, to see if anything changed. Every morning, something was off. The tape would be slightly lifted, the hair gone, or the drawer open just an inch. She stopped sleeping peacefully, waking several times each night at the slightest noise. Finally, she decided to set up her phone to record herself sleeping. She placed it on the dresser across from her bed, its lens pointed toward the room. The next morning, she watched the video, her heart pounding as she skipped through the hours. For most of the night, nothing happened, until the timestamp reached 2:37 a.m. In the corner of the frame near her closet, a faint shadow moved. It wasn't a flicker of light or camera glitch. It was the shape of a person. A hand slowly reached out from the closet door, then disappeared as the door quietly shut. Mia dropped the phone, her pulse racing. She was no longer imagining things. Someone had been in her home all along. Mia didn't go to work the next morning. Her hands were still shaking from what she had seen in the video. She replayed it again and again, hoping for another explanation, a reflection, a trick of light, anything that could make it logical. But every time she paused the clip, she could clearly see the faint outline of a hand retreating into the darkness of her closet. It wasn't her imagination. Someone had been there, only a few feet away from where she slept. Terrified, she called the building manager. He arrived in the afternoon, a tired-looking man in his 50s who had worked in the building for decades. After hearing her story, he mentioned that the structure was old and had gone through multiple renovations. Some of the apartments still had narrow crawl spaces and maintenance shafts behind the walls, sealed off years ago, but not always properly. The thought made Mia's stomach twist. She realized that if there were hidden spaces behind her closet, someone could be using them. When the manager left, she decided to see for herself. She emptied the closet completely, pushing her clothes, boxes, and shoes into the hallway. The air inside smelled faintly of damp wood and dust. Running her hand along the back wall, she felt something strange, a small panel that didn't match the rest. It was loose. With trembling fingers, she pulled it away. Behind it was a dark opening barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. The air that came out was heavy and cold. She turned on her phone flashlight and pointed it inside. What she saw made her heart drop. There was a small sleeping bag crumpled against the wall, empty food wrappers scattered across the floor, and an old flashlight that had stopped working. A notebook lay beside it, filled with rough sketches of her apartment, her living room, her bedroom, even the position of her bed. Someone had been living there, watching her, moving around when she wasn't home. The space connected to the old ventilation system and likely stretched through other parts of the building. Mia stumbled backward, her breath shallow. The reality hit her all at once. The footsteps, the misplaced items, the strange noises. They all made sense now. She wasn't alone. Someone had been crawling through the walls, silently sharing her home without her ever knowing. Mia's discovery sent a wave of panic through her that she couldn't contain. Her first instinct was to get out. She ran downstairs, clutching her phone, and called the police from the lobby of her building. Within minutes, 2 officers arrived and followed her back up to the apartment. They examined the crawl space carefully, shining flashlights inside. The smell was stronger now, stale air mixed with sweat and rot. One of the officers climbed partway in, then quickly backed out, his face pale. He told me to stay back while they waited for backup. When the police returned with more officers and equipment, they began a thorough search. What they found inside the hidden area made everyone uneasy. There were old blankets, food cans, and water bottles stacked against the wall. Someone had been using that space as a living area, and not just briefly. It looked like they had been there for weeks, maybe months. Even worse, they found a hole in the far wall of the crawl space that led into the ventilation shafts connecting multiple apartments. Whoever it was could move through the building unseen. The police collected evidence, fingerprints, shoe prints, the notebook with sketches of Mia's apartment. They told her to stay somewhere else for the night, but she refused to leave until she knew who it was. By evening, a report came in from the building manager. A few months earlier, a maintenance worker had been fired for stealing from tenants. He had disappeared before his final paycheck was collected. His name was Daniel Crow, and he had access to the building's master keys. Later that night, officers staked out the roof and the fire escape. Around 3 a.m., movement was heard from the top of the building. A shadowy figure crawled out of the access door, trying to escape. They caught him before he could get away. He was filthy, his hair tangled, eyes sunken and wild. In his backpack, they found more drawings, floor plans of other apartments, and a list of tenants' names. Mia watched from her window as they led him away in handcuffs. The officers confirmed it was Daniel Crow. He had been living above her ceiling, using the crawl space to enter her home at night while she slept. For weeks, he had been studying her every move, blending into the silence of her apartment like a ghost. After Daniel Crow's arrest, Mia tried to piece her life back together, but the comfort she once felt inside her home was gone. The building owner sealed every crawl space and repaired the ventilation shafts, assuring her that the place was now safe. The locks were changed, and extra security cameras were installed in the hallways. On the surface, everything seemed normal again, but the unease lingered. Nights still felt heavy. Every creak of the floor or distant knock made her heart race. She tried to convince herself that it was over, that the danger was behind her. Friends encouraged her to move, but she wasn't ready yet. She told herself that staying would help her regain control, that fear shouldn't drive her out of the place she had worked so hard for. Still, sleep never came easy. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night, certain she had heard something, an echo, a breath, a faint step, but when she listened closely, there was only silence. Weeks passed. She began packing her things, finally deciding to leave for good. Her new apartment was smaller but brighter, far away from the shadows of the old building. On her last night, she stayed up late, carefully boxing her belongings and filming a final walkthrough on her phone for documentation. The apartment looked almost bare, just a few boxes, her suitcase, and the echo of her own footsteps against the wooden floor. As she moved through the rooms, she spoke softly into the camera, describing each space, making sure everything was recorded for her landlord. The video showed her bedroom, her kitchen, and the now sealed closet that had once hidden the nightmare behind it. For the first time in months, she felt relieved. When she turned off the last light and stood by the door, she took one long breath and smiled. It was over. Then came the sound, a single creak, slow and heavy, from the far end of the hallway. She froze, her eyes fixed on the direction it came from, right behind her bedroom door. The sound came again, faint but deliberate, like the pressure of a foot against old wood. The camera caught her face as her smile disappeared, replaced by paralyzing fear. The screen wobbled as she turned toward the sound, whispering something inaudible, and then the recording ended abruptly, just static and darkness. When the landlord entered the next morning, the apartment was empty. Only her phone was found on the floor, still recording.